My husband left me in the rain, 37 miles from home. He said I needed a lesson. I didn't argue. I just watched him drive away. A black truck pulled up moments later. My bodyguard stepped out, calm and ready. I smiled as I climbed in. His cruelty had ended. This was his last mistake. I pressed record on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket as Andrew's Mercedes pulled into the empty rest stop. The rain hadn't started yet, but I could smell it coming. "Get out," he said, not even turning off the engine. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." 37 miles. He'd calculated it perfectly. Too far for an Uber, too remote for public transport. What he didn't know was that I'd been recording everything for 8 months, and Marcus was already parked behind the abandoned gas station, waiting for my signal. The leather seat creaked as I turned to face him. Andrew's jaw was set in that familiar line of satisfaction, the one he wore when closing a particularly ruthless deal at his hedge fund. 3 hours ago, we'd been sitting in Morton's steakhouse celebrating our anniversary. Now he was abandoning me on a remote stretch of highway because I'd asked why $10,000 had disappeared from our joint account. "You're seriously doing this?" I kept my voice steady, letting the phone capture every word. "Actions have consequences, Amanda. You went behind my back, called my accountant, embarrassed me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who manages the money in this family." I thought about the pearl earring in my jewelry box at home. Nadine's earring found under our bed 2 days ago. The $10,000 had probably bought her something pretty. But I didn't mention it. Not yet. Everything had to happen in the right order, just as Marcus and I had rehearsed. "It's going to storm," I said, gesturing at the darkening sky. "Then you'd better start walking." His fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "Unless you want to apologize right now and admit you were wrong. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here with me today. If you believe that no one deserves to be abandoned in a storm, literal or metaphorical, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps these important stories reach those who need them most. 6 months ago I would have apologized. 6 months ago I still believed the marriage could be saved. That was before I'd found the second set of books for his company, before the mysterious withdrawals, before discovering he'd been slowly transferring our assets into accounts only he controlled. The moment I'd started asking questions, he turned vicious. Tonight was his escalation, but it was also his mistake. "I'll walk," I said, opening the door. "Smart choice. Maybe by the time you get home you'll remember your place." I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop had been abandoned for years, just a dark building with boarded windows and a parking lot being reclaimed by weeds. Andrew had chosen it specifically for its isolation. He'd mentioned it last week casually while we were driving past. "Imagine being stranded here," he'd said. "Miles from anywhere." That's when I knew what he was planning. The Mercedes engine revved. Through the passenger window I could see him checking his phone, probably texting Nadine that the deed was done. Then he pulled away, tires squealing slightly on the worn pavement, leaving me standing alone in the gathering darkness. I counted to 60, watching his taillights disappear around the bend. Then I walked calmly toward the abandoned gas station where Marcus's black Ford was hidden. My brother stepped out, holding an umbrella and a thermos of coffee. "Did you get everything?" he asked. "Every word." I pulled out my phone, stopping the recording. "He actually said I need to remember my place." Marcus shook his head. 3 years of watching him control you was bad enough. But this. He gestured at the empty rest stop. "This is criminal abandonment. Rebecca's going to have a field day with this recording." I accepted the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through my hands. The rain was starting now, fat drops hitting the cracked concrete. By morning, Andrew would think I'd spent the night walking through a storm, broken and humiliated. He'd expect to find me huddled on our doorstep, ready to beg forgiveness. "Valentina's ready?" I asked. "She's been monitoring the accounts all evening. The moment he transferred that $10,000 this afternoon, she documented everything. The forensic audit goes back 2 years. He's been bleeding money into offshore accounts, probably planning to divorce you once he'd hidden enough." "And Rebecca?" "Filing the emergency papers at 9 tomorrow morning. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. She says with tonight's recording plus everything else we've gathered, he won't know what hit him." We climbed into Marcus's truck just as the sky opened up, rain hammering against the windshield. I thought about Andrew driving home, satisfied with his cruel lesson, maybe pouring himself a scotch to celebrate putting his wife in her place. He had no idea that 8 months ago when he'd first started hiding money, I'd hired my own team. Marcus had installed cameras throughout our house under the guise of security upgrades. Valentina, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial abuse cases, had been tracking every penny. Rebecca, one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys, had been building a case file that now filled 3 boxes. The house recordings uploaded successfully, Marcus said, checking his phone. We've got him on camera last Tuesday bringing Nadine there while you were at your mother's. They used your bed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, that had passed months ago. This was resolve, hard and crystalline. He's been planning this for a while, I said. The escalation, the financial control, the isolation from friends. Classic abuse patterns. Rebecca says judges don't look kindly on husbands who abandon their wives as punishment. Marcus drove carefully through the storm, taking back roads to avoid any possibility of Andrew seeing us. We'd planned this route weeks ago, even doing practice runs. Every detail mattered. The hotel room was booked under my maiden name, paid for with cash Marcus had withdrawn gradually over 2 months. The clothes I'd need were already there, along with copies of all the documentation. You know he'll come looking for you when you don't show up tonight, Marcus said. Let him. The hotel security cameras will show me checking in alone, soaking wet, traumatized. The front desk clerk will testify that I could barely speak through the tears. Rebecca coached me on exactly what to say and how to act. The rain grew heavier as we drove toward the city. Andrew would be home by now, probably on his second drink, maybe calling Nadine to brag about teaching me a lesson. Tomorrow morning he'd wake up expecting to find me broken. Instead, he'd find his assets frozen, his office locked, and federal investigators waiting to discuss the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered in his hedge fund's books. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked as the hotel came into view. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, independent and successful before Andrew had systematically dismantled my life. I thought about the recording on my phone, his cold voice telling me to get out and walk 37 miles in a storm. I thought about Nadine's earring and the empty bank accounts and the prenup he'd hidden in his office that would have left me with nothing. I've been ready for 8 months, I said. He just gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. Marcus pulled up to the hotel's side entrance. I grabbed the small bag we'd prepared, just enough to look like I'd escaped with nothing, and stepped out into the rain. It was time to play the part of the traumatized wife, abandoned and afraid. Tomorrow Andrew would learn who really needed a lesson. The hotel lobby felt impossibly bright after the darkness outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the front desk, my hands shaking just enough to be convincing. The night clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, immediately reached for a stack of towels. Oh my goodness, are you all right? She rushed around the counter, wrapping a towel around my shoulders. My husband, I managed, letting my voice crack. He left me at a rest stop. In the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me. Her face shifted from concern to horror. Perfect. Every word would be documented in the hotel's incident report, just as Rebecca had instructed. The clerk guided me to a chair and brought me hot tea while processing my check-in. I gave her my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and paid with the emergency credit card I'd opened 6 months ago, the one Andrew knew nothing about. Room 412 was small but clean, overlooking the city lights blurred by rain. I locked the door, put the chain on, and finally allowed myself to breathe. Then I pulled out my second phone, the one Marcus had given me, and played back the recording from the car. Andrew's voice filled the room, cold and measured. You think you're so clever, don't you? Calling my accountant behind my back. Asking questions about our finances like you'd understand the answers. My own voice, carefully controlled. It's our money, Andrew. I have a right to know where it's going. Our money. His laugh was sharp. I earn it. I manage it. You spend it on overpriced groceries and those ridiculous charity luncheons. $70 for organic vegetables last week, Amanda. $70. I remembered that shopping trip. I'd bought ingredients for the dinner party he'd insisted on hosting for his clients. The same dinner where he'd spent $800 on wine without blinking. The recording continued. You embarrassed me at the Morrisons' party. contradicting me about the European markets in front of my colleagues. Where did you even get those opinions? Some morning talk show. I have an MBA from Northwestern, Andrew. I worked in financial services for 5 years before we met. Before I rescued you from that mediocre career, you mean? You were analyzing penny stocks at a third-tier firm. I gave you a life you never could have achieved on your own. I closed my eyes, remembering the woman I'd been at Henderson Investments. I hadn't been analyzing penny stocks. I'd been managing a portfolio worth $30 million. But Andrew had rewritten history so many times, sometimes even I forgot the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Valentina found something. 3 more accounts in the Caymans. He's been moving money for 18 months. 18 months. I thought back to when things had started changing. The sudden interest in separate checking accounts, for tax purposes. The financial advisor who appeared without explanation. The documents he'd asked me to sign without reading because, it's just routine stuff, trust me. Another text, this one from Rebecca. Judge Coleman agreed to emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording. Judge Patricia Coleman had a reputation for seeing through men like Andrew. She'd presided over 3 high-profile financial abuse cases in the past year, all resulting in favorable outcomes for the wives. Rebecca had specifically waited for her rotation. I changed into the dry clothes from the emergency bag I'd hidden here yesterday, then sat at the small desk and began writing. Not the statement Rebecca would help me polish for court, but notes for myself, reminders of who I really was beneath the person Andrew had tried to create. I wrote about the promotion I'd turned down because Andrew said the travel would strain our marriage. The investment opportunity I'd identified that would have tripled my personal savings, if I'd still had personal savings. The friendship with my college roommate that ended when Andrew convinced me she was jealous of our happiness. My phone rang. Andrew's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker, recording it with my second phone. Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson's been learned, okay? Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. 10 minutes later, another call. This time his voice was harder. I know you have your phone. Stop being childish and call me back. If you're trying to worry me, it's not working. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home. But I could hear the edge creeping in. He was starting to realize something was off. I'd always called by now, always apologized, always came crawling back. The silence was breaking his script. At midnight, Nadine called. I almost didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer, staying silent. Hello? Amanda. Her voice was uncertain. Andrew asked me to call you. He's worried. He said you two had a fight and you're not answering his calls. He wants you to know he's sorry and you should come home. Andrew never apologized. Never admitted fault. That he'd sent his mistress to deliver a fake apology showed how off balance he was. I hung up without speaking. By 1 a.m, the calls were coming every 15 minutes. Andrew, his mother Margaret, even his business partner James. I documented every single one, their numbers, their times, their increasingly frantic messages. The abandoned wife was supposed to be desperate for rescue, not maintaining radio silence. I ordered room service, charging it to the card. Soup and salad and a glass of wine. Let the receipt show I was composed enough to eat. Let it document that I wasn't falling apart the way Andrew expected. At 2:30 a text came through that made me smile. Not from Andrew but from our neighbor Mrs. Chin. Saw Andrew in his driveway with a flashlight looking under your car. Then he drove off fast. Is everything okay? He was looking for my car, not knowing Marcus had moved it to a long-term parking garage across town 2 days ago. Another piece of evidence that I'd been planning to leave, that his abandonment had simply accelerated my timeline. I pulled the curtains aside and watched the storm rage over the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was beginning to realize his perfectly controlled world was slipping. He thought he taught me a lesson about power and place. Tomorrow, when the markets opened and he discovered his offshore accounts frozen, when his key card failed at the office, when federal investigators appeared with questions about discrepancies Valentina had uncovered, he'd understand who'd really been teaching whom. The rain hammered against the window like it was trying to break through. 8 months of planning, of documenting, of pretending to be the subdued wife while building a case that would destroy him. All leading to this moment, this perfect storm of his own making. I set my alarm for 7, knowing I'd need to look appropriately distraught for the emergency hearing. Rebecca would meet me at noon to prepare. But for now, for these few hours, I sat in the darkness and felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Freedom. The morning sun cut through the hotel curtains at 7 sharp, but I'd been awake since 5, sitting at the small desk with my laptop open to our joint checking account. The balance showed exactly what I expected. Andrew had already moved another $20,000 out at 6:47 a.m. He was panicking, trying to hide assets before I could get to them. Too late. Valentina had already documented everything. By noon, my hotel suite had transformed into a command center. Valentina arrived first, wheeling in 2 suitcases full of printed documents, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged from working through the night. She spread everything across the dining table methodically: bank statements, wire transfer records, falsified tax documents, each stack labeled with color-coded tabs. "The Cayman accounts are frozen as of 9 this morning," she said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Andrew tried to access them at dawn. 3 failed attempts. He's probably destroying his office right now." Rebecca walked in next, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in rapid legal terms I only half understood. She ended the call and turned to me with an expression of grim satisfaction. "Judge Coleman moved our hearing to 1 o'clock. She wants to address this immediately. Also, Andrew hired Richard Blackwood." "The shark?" Marcus asked, entering with a box of surveillance equipment. "The same one who got that pharmaceutical executive off last year. Blackwood doesn't come cheap. Andrew must have liquidated something significant to afford him." I felt a flutter of concern, but Rebecca placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Blackwood's good, but he can't argue with video evidence and financial records. Plus, he's walking into this cold. We've had 8 months to prepare." Marcus connected his laptop to the suite's television and pulled up the surveillance footage from our home. "I've compiled the highlights, if you can call them that. Fair warning, Amanda, this isn't easy to watch." The first clip showed Andrew in his study at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago. I'd been asleep upstairs, knocked out by the sleeping pills he'd started suggesting I take for my anxiety. On screen, Andrew carefully photographed documents from our safe, then placed them back exactly as they were. The documents were our joint investment portfolios, my mother's power of attorney forms, and the deed to the lake house my grandmother had left me. "He's been building a duplicate file," Valentina explained, "creating forgeries with subtle changes. If you hadn't caught this, he could have slowly replaced the originals." The next clip was worse. Andrew and Nadine in our living room 2 months ago when he told me he was at a client dinner. She was wearing my robe, the silk one from our honeymoon in Paris. They were laughing about something on his phone. "Turn the volume up," I said, though my stomach churned. Andrew's voice filled the room. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. "I've trained her well. A few more months and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can stop this charade." Nadine's giggle was like nails on glass. "The prenup really says she gets nothing? The prenup's irrelevant. She'll never fight it. Amanda doesn't have the spine. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be in Costa Rica, and she'll be too broken to do anything about it." Marcus paused the video. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I stood up, walked to the window and stared at the city below. Somewhere out there, Andrew was probably in his office trying to figure out why his computer access was revoked, why his assistant couldn't reach the bank, why everything was falling apart. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "Do you want to see it?" I nodded. The next clip showed Andrew on the phone in our garage, pacing between our cars. The timestamp showed last Tuesday when I'd been at my book club. "Jennifer's been perfect," he was saying. "She has no idea I'm recording our conversations. Every detail about Amanda's mother's estate, the Alzheimer's diagnosis they're hiding, the trust fund from their father. It's worth nearly $2 million and Amanda doesn't even know it exists." My legs felt weak. Jennifer, my younger sister who I'd been protecting from her gambling addiction for years, who I'd covered for with our parents countless times. She'd been feeding Andrew information about our family, about money I didn't even know existed. "When did he contact her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Valentina pulled up phone records. "First contact was 13 months ago. Regular calls started 10 months ago. Always when you weren't home. He's been paying her debts in exchange for information." Rebecca checked her watch. We need to leave for court in 30 minutes. Amanda, are you ready for this? Seeing him today. I turned from the window. Show me the rest first. I need to know everything. Marcus clicked to another folder. These are from his office computer. I had a contact in IT pull them before Andrew's access was cut this morning. The screen filled with emails between Andrew and his attorney, dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, Project Fresh Start. Inside were detailed plans for divorcing me, including psychological tactics to make me doubt myself, financial moves to leave me destitute, and even suggestions for gradually increasing emotional abuse to make me more compliant during proceedings. One line stood out. The key is to make her believe she's going crazy. Gaslight consistently. Hide things, deny conversations, contradict her memories. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight effectively. I thought about all the times over the past year when Andrew had told me I was misremembering things. The dinner reservation I'd made that he swore I'd never told him about. The conversation about visiting my parents that he claimed never happened. The jewelry that went missing, then reappeared in strange places. I'd started writing things down secretly, thinking I was losing my mind. He was following a playbook, Rebecca said. This attorney, Douglas Stern, specializes in high-net-worth divorces where one spouse wants to leave the other with nothing. He's currently under investigation by the bar for ethics violations. Valentina pulled up one final document. This is what triggered our emergency filing this morning. Andrew transferred $3.2 million from his hedge fund's client accounts into a personal account in Panama yesterday afternoon. Right before he abandoned you. He must have thought he'd have more time before anyone noticed. He was running, I said, understanding flooding through me. The abandonment wasn't just about control. He knew something was closing in. The SEC received an anonymous tip yesterday morning, Rebecca said with a slight smile, about irregularities in his fund's reporting. I looked at her. Valentina actually. Once she documented the embezzlement, we had an obligation to report it. The weight of Andrew's crimes was staggering. This wasn't just about our marriage or his affair. He was a criminal who'd been using me as cover while he pillaged client accounts and prepared his escape. The man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years was capable of destroying not just me, but dozens of innocent investors who'd trusted him with their retirement savings. Judge Coleman needs to see all of this, I said, gathering my strength. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. Rebecca smiled, the kind of smile that reminded me why she'd never lost a financial abuse case. She'll see it all. And then Andrew Mitchell is going to learn what it feels like to lose everything. The courthouse corridors were marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate. I walked through them in my sharpest suit, the navy one Andrew had never seen because I'd bought it last month specifically for this moment. Rebecca walked beside me, briefcase in hand, while Marcus flanked my other side. We entered courtroom 4B at exactly 12:55 p.m. Andrew was already there, seated beside Richard Blackwood, whose $1,000 haircut couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes. Andrew looked smaller somehow, his usual commanding presence diminished by wrinkled clothes and shadows under his eyes. He'd clearly slept in his office. When he saw me, his expression shifted from exhaustion to pure rage. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, her black robes adding gravity to an already tense atmosphere. She took her seat and immediately began reviewing the documents before her, reading glasses perched on her nose. We're here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Mitchell regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen every type of marital disaster. Mr. Blackwood, I see you've just been retained this morning. Yes, Your Honor. We request a continuance to properly review. Denied. Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence. He turned to Rebecca. Counselor, present your evidence. Rebecca stood, smooth as silk. Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. yesterday, Andrew Mitchell deliberately abandoned his wife at a rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe storm. We have audio recording of the incident. She played the recording through the courtroom speakers. Andrew's voice filled the space, cold and clear. You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect. I watched Andrew's face go white. Blackwood leaned over, whispering furiously. Andrew shook his head, gesturing wildly with his hands. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million, and evidence of embezzlement from his hedge fund totaling $3.2 million. Objection. Blackwood stood. These are unsubstantiated allegations. Then let's substantiate them, Rebecca said calmly, producing a stack of bank documents. Exhibit A through F, Your Honor. Wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, all initiated by Mr. Mitchell without his wife's knowledge or consent. Judge Coleman reviewed the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. Mr. Mitchell, did you abandon your wife last night? Andrew stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. My wife and I had an argument. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Mitchell. I left her at a rest stop, but during a storm? 37 miles from home. She had her phone. She could have called someone. The judge's eyebrows rose. How considerate of you. She turned back to Rebecca. Continue. Rebecca pulled up financial records on the courtroom screen. Mr. Mitchell has also been conducting an extramarital affair with his assistant, Nadine Rodriguez, using marital funds to purchase gifts and fund trips. This includes a pearl necklace valued at $12,000, reported as stolen to insurance but actually given to Ms. Rodriguez. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. He's here. The courtroom doors opened and Tom Chin from the SEC walked in, followed by 2 federal agents. Andrew's head whipped around and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Your Honor, Tom Chin addressed the judge. I apologize for the interruption. We have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement. Blackwood jumped up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. So is stealing $3.2 million from client accounts, Judge Coleman responded dryly. She looked at the federal agents. Gentlemen, please wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Mitchell isn't going anywhere. Andrew sank into his chair. His phone, sitting on the defendant's table, lit up with call after call. I could see the names flashing. His mother, his business partner James, and repeatedly Nadine. Given the evidence presented, Judge Coleman continued, I'm granting the emergency injunction. All marital assets are frozen pending investigation. Mrs. Mitchell is awarded exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell, you are ordered to stay 500 feet away from your wife. $10,000 a month? Andrew exploded, standing despite Blackwood's attempt to pull him down. That's insane. She doesn't need. Mr. Mitchell, you abandoned your wife in a storm after hiding millions in assets. I'm being generous, not holding you in contempt right now. Sit down. As Andrew collapsed back into his chair, my phone rang. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. I declined the call, but she immediately called again. And again. Rebecca leaned over. You should document those. I nodded, screenshotting the call log. 17 calls from Jennifer in the past hour. 43 from Andrew since last night. 22 from his mother Margaret. Even a few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Andrew's colleagues or clients who'd heard about the federal investigation. Tom Chin approached our table while the judge finalized her orders. Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need your cooperation with our investigation. Your attorney mentioned you have additional evidence. I nodded. 8 months of documentation. Financial records, recordings, emails. Everything. Good. Your husband's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges. Andrew must have heard him because he suddenly stood again, pointing at me. You did this. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap. Judge Coleman's gavel came down hard. Mr. Mitchell, control yourself or I'll add contempt charges. She's been planning this. Andrew continued, his composure completely shattered. The recording, the documentation, she knew I was going to leave her there. So you admit to abandoning her? The judge asked. Blackwood physically pulled Andrew back down, but the damage was done. Andrew had just confessed in open court in front of federal agents to deliberately abandoning me. As we prepared to leave, Nadine burst through the courtroom doors. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her carefully styled hair disheveled. She looked around wildly until her eyes landed on Andrew. You said you were divorced, she screamed across the courtroom. You said the papers were already filed. You said she was crazy and making things up. The judge sighed. Ma'am, please remove yourself from my courtroom. But Nadine wasn't done. She pulled out her phone, waving it in the air. I have texts. Recordings. He promised me we were getting married. He said the money was his. Tom Chen's eyes lit up. He approached Nadine carefully. Ma'am, we'd very much like to speak with you. Andrew's destruction was complete. His mistress was turning state's evidence, his assets were frozen, federal agents were waiting to arrest him, and his carefully constructed image had crumbled in less than an hour. As we walked out, leaving Andrew to be processed by federal agents, my phone buzzed with one final message. It was from Margaret, Andrew's mother. I hope you're satisfied, destroying a good man over petty jealousy. I deleted it without responding. Margaret would learn soon enough that her son wasn't a good man. He was a criminal who'd been exposed, and I wasn't the one who'd destroyed him. He'd destroyed himself. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when we emerged. Someone had leaked the story. Probably a court clerk who recognized Andrew's name from the financial pages. Microphones thrust toward us as Rebecca guided me through the crowd, her hand firm on my elbow. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true your husband stole millions? Amanda, how long have you been planning this? Will you be pressing additional charges? Rebecca stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. My client will not be making any statements at this time. The federal investigation is ongoing. We pushed through to Marcus's truck, and I caught a glimpse of the evening news van setting up across the street. By tonight, Andrew's face would be on every local channel. The golden boy of Minneapolis hedge funds, arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Margaret must be dying inside. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the couch while Rebecca poured us both water. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since we'd left court. I scrolled through the messages, each one a different flavor of shock or judgment. A text from my hairdresser. Just saw the news. Good for you, honey. From Andrew's golf buddy Richard. This is all a misunderstanding, right? Andrew would never do what they're saying. From 3 different neighbors, variations of, we always knew something was off about him. The most interesting message came from James Morrison, Andrew's business partner. Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the fund you should know. Things that weren't in the federal filing. Rebecca read it over my shoulder. Set up a meeting. Record everything. At 4 o'clock, the local news broke the story. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Prominent hedge fund manager arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment incident. They'd gotten Andrew's mugshot already. He looked haggard, his usual perfectly styled hair disheveled, his designer suit replaced with standard-issue jail clothing. The reporter stood outside our house. My house now, describing the scandal in breathless detail. Sources close to the investigation report that Andrew Mitchell allegedly abandoned his wife during last night's severe storm, leaving her stranded 37 miles from home. This morning, federal agents arrested Mitchell on charges of embezzling $3.2 million from client accounts. His wife, Amanda Mitchell, could not be reached for comment. My phone rang. Jennifer again. This time I answered. Amanda, please, I need to explain. You told him about Mom's will. About the trust fund Dad set up. About her diagnosis. Silence. Then quietly, he said he was trying to help. He said you were too stressed to handle the information, that he wanted to protect you. He paid your gambling debts. I didn't know what he was planning. Thought he loved you. He seemed so concerned, so caring. He said you were fragile, that you needed guidance. I thought about all the times Jennifer had called over the past year, asking seemingly innocent questions. How's Mom doing? Have you talked to her lawyer lately? Remember that property Dad bought in Wisconsin? Each conversation had been intelligence gathering for Andrew. He played you, I said. Just like he played me. Amanda, I'm so sorry. When I saw the news, when I realized what he'd done, I've been sick all day. Can we meet? Please. Rebecca shook her head, but something in Jennifer's voice made me pause. She sounded genuinely broken, not just worried about consequences. Tomorrow. Neutral location. You come alone. After I hung up, Marcus pulled up social media on his laptop. You need to see this. Andrew's company Facebook page was imploding. Clients were posting demands for their money back. Former employees were sharing stories of suspicious activities they'd witnessed. One woman wrote, "He fired me when I questioned missing funds last year. Now I know why." But the most devastating blow came from Nadine. She'd gone nuclear on Instagram, posting screenshots of their text conversations, photos from their trips funded with stolen money, and a long caption detailing how Andrew had manipulated her into believing I was the villain. "He told me his wife was emotionally disturbed," she wrote. "That she refused to grant him a divorce. That she threatened to ruin him if he left. I believed every word because he was so convincing, so sophisticated. I was an idiot, but he was a master manipulator." The photos were damaging. Andrew and Nadine in first-class seats to Paris, champagne glasses raised. Andrew and Nadine at the exact resort in Mexico where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. Andrew and Nadine in our bed. She'd actually posted that one, though Instagram quickly removed it. By 6 o'clock, Andrew's mother Margaret had released a statement through her lawyer. Rebecca read it aloud, barely containing her laughter. "The Mitchell family is shocked by these allegations. We believe this is a coordinated attack orchestrated by a vindictive spouse seeking financial gain. Andrew Mitchell is an upstanding member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating woman who married him for his money." "She's really going with that angle?" Marcus asked. "After what everyone heard her say in court?" My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Against Rebecca's advice, I answered. "Mrs. Mitchell? This is Patricia Huang from the Wall Street Journal. We're running a story about systematic fraud in boutique hedge funds. Your husband's case is part of a larger pattern we've been investigating. Would you be willing to share your experience?" Rebecca took the phone. "This is Amanda Mitchell's attorney. All press inquiries should be directed to my office." She hung up and turned to me. "By tomorrow this will be national news. Andrew didn't just destroy himself, he's taking down an entire network of corrupt fund managers. The FBI is expanding their investigation." I walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in Federal Holding, Andrew was probably meeting with Blackwood trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spinning video evidence, recorded confessions, and millions in stolen money. My phone lit up with one more message, this one from David Brennan, Andrew's biggest client. "Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know that several of us victims are pursuing civil suits against your husband. However, we want to be clear, you are not our target. We know you were a victim too. In fact, we'd like you to testify about what you observed." The irony was perfect. Andrew had spent years telling me I was too stupid to understand finance, too naive to grasp business. Now his former clients wanted my testimony to help bury him. As the sun set over Minneapolis, painting the sky the color of justice, I realized that Andrew's public downfall was just beginning. Tomorrow there would be more headlines, more revelations, more people coming forward with stories about the man they trusted with their money. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I sat in peaceful silence, no longer afraid of his footsteps, his moods, his cruel words designed to keep me small. The man who'd abandoned me in the rain had created his own storm, and now he was drowning in it. The next morning brought a knock at my hotel door that I wasn't expecting. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing in the hallway, her usually perfect appearance completely undone. Her hands shook as she clutched a manila envelope to her chest, and her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I thought we agreed to meet at a neutral location. I couldn't wait. "Amanda, please. There are things you need to know right now. Before the FBI talks to me this afternoon." Marcus appeared in the doorway of the adjoining room, alert and protective. I nodded to him that it was okay, then let Jennifer inside. She sat on the edge of the couch, placing the envelope on the coffee table with trembling fingers. "Andrew first contacted me 13 months ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knew about the gambling. I don't know how he found out, but he knew I owed $47,000 to some very unforgiving people. He offered to pay it all, no questions asked, if I just answered some questions about our family finances. And you agreed." My voice was flat, controlled. I was desperate. They were threatening to go to my employer to ruin my career. Andrew seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. He said you were too proud to ask our parents for money, that he wanted to surprise you by solving family problems behind the scenes. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed emails. "These are our conversations. Every one of them. I printed them all last night when I realized what he'd really been doing. I picked up the first email dated over a year ago. Andrew's tone was warm, concerned, brotherly even. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband, wanting to understand my family dynamics so he could support me better. The manipulation was masterful. He was particularly interested in Mom, Jennifer continued. He wanted to know about her health, her mental state, her finances. I thought he was planning something nice for her, maybe paying for better care. You told him about the Alzheimer's. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. She made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want you to worry, said you had enough stress with Andrew being so demanding. But he was so persistent, so caring. He said he'd noticed signs and wanted to help. I kept reading. The emails showed Andrew's questions growing more specific over time. What properties did our parents own? Were there any trusts? Who was the executor of their wills? Jennifer had answered everything, believing she was helping her brother-in-law better care for our family. Last month he asked me to get Mom to sign some papers, Jennifer said. He said they were for insurance purposes, that it would protect her assets if her condition worsened. I actually took them to her, Amanda. Thank God her lawyer was there that day and recognized them as property transfer documents. That's when I started to realize something was wrong. My phone buzzed. David Brennan was calling. I put him on speaker so Marcus could hear. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you, but this is urgent. I've been going through our client files all night. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the general fund. He specifically targeted our elderly clients, particularly widows. What do you mean, targeted? Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, for instance. Her husband died 2 years ago. Left her everything with specific instructions that Andrew personally manage her portfolio. Within 6 months, Andrew had convinced her to sign power of attorney documents. She thought she was giving him authority to make trades. He used it to drain her accounts. I felt sick. Eleanor Hartley was 78 years old. I'd met her at several company events, a sweet woman who always talked about her grandchildren. How much did he take from her? $800,000. But here's the worst part. He convinced her she was developing memory problems, that she was forgetting conversations about withdrawals she'd authorized. He gaslit an elderly woman into believing she had dementia. Marcus was already taking notes, documenting everything for Rebecca. This changed the entire scope of the case. Andrew wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was a predator who specifically hunted vulnerable people. I have recordings, David continued. I started secretly recording our partnership meetings 2 years ago when I noticed discrepancies. I was building a case to take to the authorities, but I was scared. Andrew had connections everywhere. But now that he's already in custody, I want to provide everything I have. After David hung up, Jennifer pulled out one more document from her envelope. There's something else. About Dad's estate. Our father had died 5 years ago, leaving what we thought was a modest inheritance split between Jennifer and me. But the paper she handed me showed something different. A trust account in my name alone, established the year before he died. He knew about my gambling even then, Jennifer said quietly. He loved me, but he didn't trust me with money. So he set this up for you with Mom as the trustee. It's worth about $2 million. Andrew found out about it through me, and he's been trying to access it for months. I stared at the document. $2 million my father had hidden to protect it from both Jennifer's addiction and, unknowingly, from my husband's greed. The account was held at a small private bank in Wisconsin, one Andrew wouldn't have known about without Jennifer's information. We need to go see Mom, Jennifer said. Today. She's been holding on to something for you, something she wouldn't even tell me about. She said she was waiting for the right moment. An hour later, we sat in my mother's room at the memory care facility. She was having one of her increasingly rare clear days, her eyes bright and focused as she held my hand. I knew what he was the first time I met him, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. The way he looked at our house, evaluating everything like he was cataloging assets. The way he steered conversations toward money. Your father saw it too. She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a small key. Safety deposit box. First National Bank on Hennepin. Your father put things there the week before he died. Documents. Evidence. Evidence of what, Mom? Andrew tried to forge your signature last year. Loan documents, property transfers. The bank manager was your father's friend. He called me, sent me copies of everything. It's all in the box. I took the key, feeling its weight. My father had been protecting me even from beyond the grave, and my mother had been standing guard over that protection despite her declining memory. There's more, Mom said, her grip tightening on my hand. The FBI came here yesterday. Not about Andrew's arrest, about something bigger. They said his name came up in an investigation that's been running for 3 years. A network of fund managers who've been systematically defrauding elderly clients across 5 states. The room felt suddenly airless. Andrew's abandonment of me in the rain wasn't just about control or cruelty. He'd known the FBI was closing in. He'd wanted me broken and compliant because he thought he could use me as either a shield or a scapegoat when everything collapsed. He never expected you to fight back, my mother said, a small smile crossing her face. Men like him never do. They think kindness is weakness. They're always surprised when they learn otherwise. As we prepared to leave, my mother squeezed my hand one more time. Your father would be proud of you. You're stronger than Andrew ever imagined. Driving away from the facility, Jennifer beside me and Marcus following in his truck, I thought about the layers of deception Andrew had built. Each revelation peeled back another level of his criminality. He wasn't just a bad husband or a corrupt fund manager. He was the center of a web of financial abuse that had destroyed dozens of lives. But he'd made one fatal error. He'd assumed that the woman he'd left in the rain would stay there, broken and defeated. Instead, she'd become the storm that would wash away everything he'd built on the suffering of others. The First National Bank on Hennepin stood like a fortress of old money and older secrets. Jennifer waited in the car while Marcus accompanied me inside, where the safety deposit box my mother had protected waited in a climate-controlled vault. The bank manager, Mr. Paulson, remembered my father well and handled the key with the reverence of someone who understood he was part of something significant. Inside the box lay a stack of documents that made my hands tremble. Forged loan applications with my signature, dated 6 months ago. Property transfer papers for my grandmother's lake house, which Andrew had apparently tried to sell without my knowledge. Bank statements from accounts I'd never seen, opened in my name but controlled by Andrew. My father had somehow obtained copies of everything, his handwriting on sticky notes explaining what each document meant. One note, attached to a forged power of attorney document, simply read, "He will try to take everything. Don't let him." Marcus photographed every page while I sat in stunned silence. The scope of Andrew's betrayal kept expanding, like ink spreading through water. This wasn't just about our marriage or even the stolen millions. He'd been systematically working to erase my financial existence, to make me completely dependent on him or worse, to frame me for his crimes if necessary. 4 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for the first day of Andrew's criminal trial. The media attention had only intensified since his arrest. News vans lined the street. Reporters called out questions I didn't answer. I wore a charcoal gray suit that had never seen the inside of our shared closet, bought specifically for this moment. Professional, dignified, expensive enough to show I wasn't broken. Andrew sat at the defendant's table in a suit that no longer fit properly. He'd lost weight in federal custody, and his formerly perfect hair had grown out awkwardly. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I smiled, the same serene smile I used to give him over morning coffee when he'd lecture me about my spending. But now that smile carried the weight of everything I knew and everything he was about to lose. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres, laid out the case methodically. 12 counts of wire fraud. 2 counts of elder abuse. 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Doctored books, hidden accounts, forged documents, recorded conversations where Andrew explicitly discussed stealing from clients. For 11 days, witness after witness took the stand. Elderly clients described how Andrew had convinced them to sign documents they didn't understand. Former employees testified about being ordered to falsify records. The forensic accountant walked the jury through the labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell companies Andrew had created. On day 12, the courtroom doors opened and Nadine Rodriguez walked in. She looked nothing like the polished young woman who'd worn my grandmother's pearls. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a conservative dress, her elaborate hairstyle with a simple bun. She'd been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, and she was about to bury Andrew with it. Ms. Rodriguez, the prosecutor began, how long were you romantically involved with the defendant? 18 months, Nadine answered, her voice steady but quiet. And during that time, did Mr. Mitchell ever discuss his business practices with you? Yes. Frequently. He thought it was amusing to explain how he was moving money around without anyone noticing. He called it playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else played checkers. She produced recordings from her phone, conversations where Andrew bragged about targeting elderly clients, about hiding money from me, about his plans to disappear to Costa Rica once he'd accumulated enough. In one recording, his voice clear and damning, he said, "Amanda's the perfect cover. Sweet, trusting, asks no questions. By the time she figures out what's happening, I'll be gone and she'll be left holding the bag." But Nadine's most devastating revelation came near the end of her testimony. 3 weeks before his arrest, Andrew told me he was planning to leave me too. He had another woman in Costa Rica, someone he'd met online. He was going to abandon me just like he abandoned his wife. The look on Andrew's face was worth every moment of pain he'd caused me. His jaw dropped, his attorney frantically whispered in his ear, but the damage was done. His mistress had just revealed that he'd been playing everyone, including her. The next day brought another shock. A young man named Christopher Walsh took the stand. 22 years old, with Andrew's same sharp jawline and calculating eyes. The prosecutor established his identity quickly. Andrew's son from a college relationship, whose existence Andrew had hidden for over 2 decades. My mother has been receiving payments from Andrew Mitchell for 22 years, Christopher testified. $1,500 a month to keep quiet about my existence. She has records showing the money came from his client accounts. I watched Andrew shrink in his chair as Christopher continued. He told my mother that if she ever contacted his family or went public, he'd destroy her reputation and ensure she never worked in finance again. She has that threat in writing. The prosecutor introduced 22 years of bank records, showing regular payments from the same accounts Andrew had been pillaging. He'd been stealing from elderly clients not just for luxury and escape, but to hide the evidence of his past. Andrew's defense attorney tried to object, arguing this was prejudicial and irrelevant to the financial crimes, but Judge Coleman overruled him. It establishes a pattern of deception and financial malfeasance spanning the defendant's entire adult life. On the final day of testimony, Andrew made the catastrophic decision to take the stand himself. Against his attorney's visible protests, he stood and walked to the witness box, still believing he could talk his way out of this. For 2 hours he tried to spin a narrative where he was the victim. He claimed I'd known about the affairs and approved. He insisted the elderly clients had authorized every transaction. He portrayed himself as a brilliant financial mind who'd simply made some bookkeeping errors. Then the prosecutor began his cross-examination, and Andrew's composure cracked like ice under pressure. When confronted with the recordings, he claimed they were taken out of context. When shown the forged documents, he suggested I might have created them. When presented with evidence of the hush money to Christopher's mother, he actually said, "That was a personal matter unrelated to my business." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. As the foreman stood to read the verdict, I held Marcus's hand on one side and Rebecca's on the other. On count 1 wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2 wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. By the time they reached count 15, Andrew had put his head in his hands. Guilty on all charges. The man who'd left me in the rain 37 miles from home was about to learn what real abandonment felt like. 2 weeks later we returned for sentencing. Judge Coleman, the same woman who'd overseen our emergency hearing months ago, looked down at Andrew with undisguised contempt. "Mr. Mitchell, you targeted the most vulnerable members of society. You betrayed the trust of clients, colleagues, and family. You showed no remorse, accepting no responsibility even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of your crimes. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison without the possibility of early release." 8 years. Andrew would spend 8 years behind bars. As the bailiffs prepared to lead him away, he turned to me one last time. "This isn't over," he mouthed. I stood and spoke clearly, knowing the courtroom microphones would capture every word. "You're right. The civil suits start next month." The bailiffs led Andrew away in shackles, and I walked out of the courthouse into a September afternoon that felt like the first day of spring. The civil suits would indeed start next month, with 17 of Andrew's victims seeking restitution, but that was Rebecca's battlefield now. I had something more important to build. The whistleblower reward came through 6 weeks after Andrew's sentencing, $1.2 million for providing information that led to the recovery of stolen funds. Combined with the assets the court awarded me and the trust fund my father had protected, I suddenly had the resources to do something meaningful with the pain Andrew had caused. Marcus found the building first, a renovated Victorian in Minneapolis's Whittier neighborhood that had previously housed a law firm. 3 stories, 8 offices, a conference room large enough for group sessions, and most importantly, multiple exits. Something women escaping dangerous situations would need. We signed the lease on a Thursday. By Monday, the Phoenix Foundation had its home. "We need proper security systems," Marcus said, walking through the empty rooms with his tablet making notes. "Panic buttons in every office, secured entry, surveillance that actually protects people instead of monitoring them." Valentina arrived with boxes of filing systems and encryption software. "I've already had 3 forensic accountants reach out wanting to volunteer their services. Word's spreading in the financial community about what we're doing." Rebecca had taken a leave of absence from her practice to help establish our legal aid program. "We need to be careful about how we structure this," she said, spreading incorporation documents across the conference table. "We're going to be dealing with dangerous situations, angry spouses, potential legal retaliation. Everything has to be bulletproof." Within a month, we had our first client. Maria, a teacher whose husband had hidden their savings and threatened to report her to immigration services if she tried to leave, even though she was a citizen. Valentina found the money. Rebecca filed the papers. Marcus arranged safe transportation. I sat with Maria while she cried, remembering my own tears in that hotel room the night Andrew abandoned me. Jennifer arrived at the foundation on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months sober and carrying a box of donuts as a peace offering. "I want to help," she said simply. "I know what it's like to be manipulated, to be so desperate you betray people you love. Maybe I can help others see the signs before it's too late." We started her as a volunteer, answering phones and filing paperwork. But Jennifer had a gift for talking to women who called in crisis. She understood desperation and shame in ways that even trained counselors sometimes missed. Within 6 months, she was running our support groups, sharing her story of how Andrew had exploited her addiction to gather information, helping others recognize when they were being used. My mother came to visit on one of her clear days, Marcus driving her carefully through the city she'd once known so well. She sat in my office, looking at the framed photos on the walls. Women who'd given permission to share their success stories, faces beaming as they stood in front of new apartments, at graduation ceremonies, with children they'd managed to keep safe. "Your father would be so proud," she said, touching a photo of a woman who'd escaped with 3 children and was now in nursing school. "He always said the best revenge against cruelty was kindness to others." She pulled out an envelope from her purse. "This came to the house. I thought you should see it." Inside was a newspaper clipping from the prison newsletter. Andrew had been elected treasurer of the Inmates Investment Club. Even behind bars, he was trying to maintain his image as a financial genius. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The surprise volunteer came 7 months after the trial. Nadine Rodriguez stood in our reception area, looking nothing like the woman who'd worn my grandmother's pearls. She'd cut her hair short, traded designer clothes for simple slacks and a button-down shirt, and carried herself with a humility I'd never seen before. "I've been in therapy," she said, sitting across from me in my office. "Working through how I got involved with someone like Andrew, why I ignored the red flags, why I participated in hurting you. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can prevent other young women from making my mistakes." She started by speaking at colleges, warning business students about older men in power who promise career advancement in exchange for companionship. She was brutally honest about her own choices, taking responsibility while also explaining the gradual manipulation that made those choices seem reasonable at the time. "He made me feel special," she told a group of graduate students one evening. "Like I was smarter and more sophisticated than other women my age. By the time I realized I was just another victim in his game, I was in too deep to see the exit." 1 year after Andrew's sentencing, a letter arrived at the foundation. His handwriting was still perfect, even on prison stationery. 4 pages of vitriol, blaming me for his downfall, claiming I'd orchestrated everything from the beginning, that I'd entrapped him. He listed every perceived slight, every moment he now realized had been part of my plan. The final line read, "I hope you learned your lesson." I had the letter professionally framed and hung it on my office wall, right next to my degrees and certifications. When clients asked about it, I told them the truth. Yes, I had learned my lesson. I'd learned that when someone shows you who they are through their cruelty, believe them. I'd learned that patience and planning could overcome years of abuse. Most importantly, I'd learned that the best response to someone trying to break you is to become unbreakable, then use that strength to lift others. 18 months after that night at the rest stop, I stood in my office looking at a wall covered in thank you cards. 87 women had found safety through the Phoenix Foundation. Some had needed just legal advice and financial forensics. Others had required complete extraction plans, safe houses, and new identities. Each one had arrived broken in some way, convinced they were trapped, that their situation was hopeless. Eleanor Hartley, the widow Andrew had defrauded, had become our biggest donor. She'd recovered most of her money through the civil suits and insisted on funding our emergency shelter program. "That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind," she said at our fundraising gala. "Amanda showed me I was actually finding my strength." The rain was falling again outside, drumming against the windows of the Victorian that housed hopes and second chances. I thought about that night 37 miles from home, standing in the downpour while Andrew drove away, confident he'd broken me. He thought he was teaching me about power and control, about knowing my place. Instead, he taught me that cruelty creates its own destruction, that every action has consequences, and that sometimes the person you abandon in the rain has already seen the storm coming and prepared accordingly. Through the Phoenix Foundation, his act of calculated cruelty had become the catalyst for saving women he never believed deserved saving. The ultimate lesson, the one Andrew never saw coming, wasn't about obedience or respect or knowing one's place. It was about transformation. He tried to leave me powerless in a storm. Instead, I'd become the shelter. If this story of calculated justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Amanda stood in court, wearing the sharp suit Andrew always said made women look too aggressive, and smiled at him with the same serene expression she used to give him over breakfast. What was your favorite moment of sweet revenge? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. At the promotion meeting, I smiled and said, "I can't wait for my raise." My husband, the boss, laughed. "Raise? Oh no, I gave it to Hazel." HR confirmed I wasn't even considered. Hazel grinned, "Forgot to mention it." That afternoon I cleared my desk. But what I did afterward, nobody saw it coming. "I can't wait for my raise," I announced to the conference room, my portfolio of achievements heavy in my hands. Jasper looked up from his phone for the first time since I'd walked in, and the expression on his face made my chest tighten. Not pride. Not approval. Amusement. Pure, undisguised amusement at my expense. Raise. He set down his phone with deliberate slowness. "Oh no, Aurora. I gave it to Hazel." The conference room's fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, illuminating every face turned toward me with varying degrees of discomfort and pity. Bethany from HR cleared her throat and slid a folder across the mahogany table. Her manicured nails tapped against the cover twice before withdrawing. "You weren't even considered for the position, Aurora. The decision was made last week." I stood there, portfolio still clutched against my chest, watching Hazel Morrison walk through the glass doors in her new red heels. The same heels she'd shown me last month, asking if they were too much for the office. I'd told her they were perfect for making an impression. She caught my eye and offered the slightest shrug. "Forgot to mention it," she said, settling into the leather chair directly across from where I stood. "Before we continue, if you've ever been overlooked for a promotion you deserved, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us share stories of women who refuse to accept less than their worth." The portfolio in my hands contained 8 months of evidence that I'd single-handedly saved this company from hemorrhaging clients. The Campbell Industries campaign alone, which I'd worked on until 3 in the morning for 2 straight weeks, had retained a contract worth $2 million this quarter. The Morrison Hotels crisis that I'd resolved before it hit the media. The complete overhaul of our digital marketing strategy that increased engagement by 340%. But none of that mattered now. I set the portfolio on the table without opening it. I see. Well then, I'll need the afternoon to transition my current projects. That won't be necessary, Hazel interjected, her voice carrying a confidence I'd never heard before. I've already been briefed on everything. Jasper's been bringing me up to speed for the past month. The past month. While I'd been preparing my promotion presentation, practicing my pitch in the shower, calculating how the raise would finally allow us to renovate the kitchen, my husband had been secretly training my replacement. The same husband who'd listened to me rehearse my talking points over dinner. Who'd nodded encouragingly when I'd shown him my portfolio layout. Who'd made love to me last night without once mentioning that this meeting would be my professional execution. I managed to walk out of that conference room without saying another word. My desk sat in the corner of the marketing department, a cubicle barely large enough for my chair and filing cabinet despite my unofficial role as the person who actually ran things. Through Hazel's office window, the actual marketing director's office that had sat mostly empty for 2 years, I could see shopping bags from her lunch hour sprees still piled on her credenza. Timothy was waiting by my desk holding his tablet with that familiar look of controlled panic. Aurora, the Campbell Industries presentation needs final approval before. Give it to Hazel, I said, pulling my personal items from the drawers. The orchid I'd nursed through 2 winters. The coffee mug Emma had given me that read, "World's Best Multitasker." The framed photo from our company retreat where I'd been named Employee of the Quarter for the 3rd consecutive time. But Hazel doesn't know the Campbell account. She's never even met their team. I paused, looking at Timothy's earnest face. He was 24, fresh from graduate school, brilliant but still naive enough to believe hard work guaranteed recognition. Then I guess she'd better learn quickly. The drive home took 17 minutes. I counted every red light, every turn signal, every mile that put distance between me and that building where I'd given everything and received nothing in return. Our house sat on a tree-lined street in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood, the kind of place successful couples bought when they were building their futures together. The kitchen still needed renovating. Now it would stay exactly as it was. I set the box of my belongings on the dining table and noticed the Campbell Industries contract sitting on Jasper's home office desk. The margins were filled with handwritten notes. Not Jasper's angular scrawl that I knew from 12 years of marriage. These loops and curves belonged to Hazel. Dates going back 6 weeks. Strategy notes about approaches I'd developed. Client relationship details I'd painstakingly built. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma at college. "How did the big meeting go, Mom? Did you get it?" I stared at those words, thinking about the tuition bills, the student loans we'd co-signed, the promises we'd made about supporting her dreams while I'd apparently been too blind to see my own being methodically dismantled. The house felt different already. Not like a home where 2 successful people built their life together, but like a stage where I'd been performing the role of supportive wife while missing all the signs that the show was ending. The Campbell Industries presentation I'd perfected at 5:30 that morning still sat in my laptop, ready for a meeting that would never happen. The coffee maker still held the remnants of Jasper's perfect 2 sugars no cream brew that I'd made while believing we were partners. 3 months I'd had that Thursday afternoon circled in red on my calendar. 3 months of believing that excellence would be rewarded, that dedication meant something, that the person sleeping beside me every night actually saw my value beyond my ability to fix problems and save accounts while someone else got the credit. I opened my laptop and began making a list. Not of achievements or presentations or campaigns that had saved the company millions. This list was different. This one started with every password, every client contact, every system I'd built that they didn't even know existed. Because while Jasper thought he'd simply denied me a raise, what he'd actually done was light a fuse. They just didn't know it was burning yet. The list sat on my laptop screen, cursor blinking at the end of the last password I'd documented. My hands moved to close the computer, but something made me pause. The house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you hear your own heartbeat. Jasper would be home in 2 hours, and I needed to decide what kind of evening this would be. The dutiful wife preparing dinner, or the woman who just had her career detonated by the person who was supposed to have her back. My phone vibrated against the dining table. Timothy again. Morrison Hotels is in full panic mode. Hazel told them you quit without notice. They're threatening to pull the contract. I stared at the message, feeling something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity that made everything sharper. Hazel had already started her narrative. Aurora the deserter. Aurora the unprofessional. Aurora who couldn't handle not getting her way. I typed back, not my problem anymore, but deleted it without sending. Timothy didn't deserve coldness meant for others. The front door opened at 6:47, Jasper's usual time when he wasn't working late with associates or in meetings I now wondered about. His keys hit the bowl by the entrance with their familiar clink. His footsteps moved through the foyer, paused at the dining room where my box of office belongings still sat, then continued to the kitchen where I stood chopping vegetables for a salad neither of us would eat. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. "What's for dinner?" The casual normalcy of it made my hand tighten on the knife. He moved behind me to get a beer from the refrigerator, his cologne filling the space between us. The same cologne I'd bought him for Christmas, selected because it reminded me of confidence and success. Now it smelled like betrayal, pretending everything was fine. "Jasper." I set the knife down carefully, turning to face him. "We need to talk about today." He popped the beer cap against the counter edge, a habit I'd asked him to stop because it left marks on the granite. "What about today?" "The promotion meeting." "Hazel. The fact that you've been training her for my job for a month while I prepared a presentation you knew was pointless." He sighed, the kind of exhale that suggested I was being dramatic. "Aurora, we discussed this possibility. The board has concerns about appearances. A husband promoting his wife doesn't look good, especially with the Fletcher acquisition coming up." The Fletcher acquisition I structured. The one where I spent 3 weeks courting their CMO to make sure the transition would be smooth. Which is exactly why we need someone like Hazel in that role. Someone without personal connections that could be seen as conflicts of interest. He took a long drink of his beer, avoiding my eyes. "This is what's best for the company." "Someone like Hazel who asked me last week what ROI stands for?" His jaw tightened. "She's learning. On my frameworks. Using my client relationships. Taking credit for campaigns I built at 3 a.m. while you slept beside me. That's how business works, Aurora. You knew that when we got married. You knew there would be complicated situations." I laughed, surprising both of us. Not a bitter laugh or a sad one, but genuine amusement at the mental gymnastics required to make this my fault. Complicated situations. That's what we're calling it when you systematically hand over my work to someone else while lying to my face about it. I never lied. Every morning for the past month, you watched me prepare for that meeting. You listened to me practice my presentation over dinner. You made love to me last night knowing that today you would humiliate me in front of the entire leadership team. What would you call that? He set his beer on the counter, the condensation already forming a ring on the granite. I'd call it protecting you. Do you know what people say about us? About how you only have your position because of me. This way, when you succeed, it's on your own merit. When I succeed, I've already succeeded. Every campaign that's kept us profitable this quarter has my fingerprints all over it. The only thing you've protected me from is getting credit for my own work. The doorbell rang, sharp and intrusive. We stood frozen, neither moving to answer it. It rang again, followed by knocking. That's probably Margaret, I said, remembering my sister's text about dropping by with some books she'd borrowed. I'll get it. But when I opened the door, Hazel Morrison stood on my porch. She'd changed from the red heels into designer sneakers, traded her power suit for yoga clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her smile was different now, more genuine, like we were girlfriends about to grab coffee. Hi, Aurora. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner. Behind me, I heard Jasper's footsteps approaching. Hazel, what are you doing here? You left your laptop at the office, she said to him, not me, producing his MacBook from her oversized purse. You said you needed it for the Fletcher presentation tomorrow. I thought I'd drop it by on my way to Pilates. On her way to Pilates. Our house was 15 minutes out of the way from the office to any Pilates studio in Portland. I watched Jasper take the laptop, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. The gesture was small, practiced, familiar. Thanks, he said. I completely forgot. No problem. Hazel's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. About tomorrow's presentation, should I use Aurora's deck or create something fresh? Create something fresh, he said without hesitation. We need a new perspective. She nodded, satisfied. Great. I'll see you at 7 for our breakfast meeting. Her attention shifted to me fully for the first time. Aurora, I'm sorry about today. I know it must have been unexpected, but I'm sure you understand it's what's best for everyone. The words were perfectly chosen. Not an admission of wrongdoing, not an acknowledgement of what she'd taken, just the kind of corporate sympathy that meant nothing and cost less. I could have responded with anger, with accusations, with the dozen questions burning in my throat about how long she'd been planning this, how many of my ideas she'd already claimed, how it felt to steal someone else's life's work. Had I smiled. The same smile I'd perfected in conference rooms and client dinners, the one that gave away nothing while suggesting everything was under control. Of course, Hazel. I understand perfectly. She blinked, perhaps expecting tears or shouting or some other display of emotion she could report back to the office tomorrow. When none came, she shifted uncomfortably. Well, I should get to class. After she left, Jasper closed the door and turned to me. See? She's trying to be professional about this. Professional, I repeated. Is that what we're calling showing up at your employee's house in workout clothes to deliver a laptop you could have survived without until tomorrow? Don't make this something it's not. But I was already walking away, heading upstairs to our bedroom. In the closet, I pulled out my suitcase, the one we'd bought for our honeymoon 12 years ago. It still had the luggage tag from Maui, faded but readable. Paradise found, it said. I almost laughed at the irony. What are you doing? Jasper stood in the doorway, his beer forgotten downstairs. Getting some space to think. Aurora, don't be dramatic. It's just a job. I paused, holding the sweater Emma had given me last Christmas. You're right. It's just a job. And this is just a marriage where my husband orchestrates my professional humiliation while his new protégé drops by our house in yoga pants. Nothing dramatic about that at all. The suitcase sat half-packed on our bed, Jasper watching from the doorway as I folded another blouse. Neither of us had slept. He'd stayed downstairs most of the night while I lay awake calculating 12 years of marriage against 8 months of lies. By Friday morning, the arithmetic still didn't balance. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. with an automated message from IT. Your remote access has been terminated. Please contact your administrator for questions. I grabbed my company laptop from the nightstand, fingers flying across the keyboard before they could lock me out completely. The download bar crept across the screen. 8 months of emails, project files, client correspondence. Everything that proved what I'd built and what had been stolen. An email from 3 months ago stopped me cold. Jasper to Hazel, marked confidential. Aurora is too emotionally invested in her campaigns to see the bigger picture. We need someone who can separate feelings from strategy. Let's discuss your transition timeline over dinner Thursday. Thursday. I remembered that Thursday. I'd been visiting my mother in Seattle, helping her recover from hip surgery. Jasper had said he was too busy with quarterly reports to come with me. The download finished just as the laptop screen went black, access revoked. But I had what I needed. I took screenshots with my phone while scrambling eggs Jasper wouldn't eat, maintaining the bizarre normalcy of a morning routine while our marriage dissolved in real time. He sat at the kitchen island pretending to read news on his tablet, both of us playing roles in a show that had already closed. I'll stay at Margaret's for a few days, I said, sliding eggs onto a plate I knew would go untouched. This is ridiculous, Aurora. You're overreacting to a professional decision. My phone rang before I could respond. Margaret's name flashed on the screen and I almost laughed at the timing. Hey Max. Don't you hey Max me. I just saw your LinkedIn post about exploring new opportunities. What happened? And don't give me corporate speak. I'm your sister. I glanced at Jasper, who'd gone rigid at his tablet. It's complicated. Can I call you back? Or wait. Before you hang up, I need to tell you something. Remember 6 weeks ago when I was downtown for that conference? I saw Jasper at Romano's with that woman from his office, the one with the red hair. Hazel. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Romano's. They were at the back corner table, the one you always say is too romantic for business dinners. She was laughing at something he said, touching his hand. I figured you knew about the meeting, but something felt off about it. 6 weeks ago. I'd been working late on the Morrison Hotel's crisis, eating takeout at my desk while Jasper was supposedly at a board dinner. Thanks for telling me, Margaret. I'll call you later. After I hung up, Jasper's tablet lay flat on the counter, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. It wasn't what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything. I'm just connecting dots that should have been obvious months ago. I spent the rest of Friday turning our dining room into an investigation center. The table I'd bought for hosting dinner parties became a landscape of evidence. 3 distinct piles emerged as the sun set over Portland, each more damning than the last. The first pile contained Hazel's expense reports for the past 6 months. Client dinners at restaurants our clients never visited. Conference registrations for events she never attended. Travel receipts that didn't match any scheduled meetings. Nearly $40,000 in questionable expenses, all approved by Jasper without question. The second pile was my proof of ownership. Every Campbell Industries document with my metadata embedded showing creation dates, revision histories, my digital signature on every strategic decision. The presentation Hazel claimed to have developed last month? I'd created the template in January, refined it through 17 versions, each one time-stamped and tracked. But the third pile made my hands shake. Security badge records I'd saved months ago for an efficiency audit, never submitted because I'd found something else entirely. Jasper and Hazel's badges swiping into the executive floor at 11 p.m. on 7 different Saturdays. Always when I was in Seattle with my mother. Always leaving within minutes of each other around 2 a.m. By midnight, the evidence covered every inch of the table. My phone had been silent except for work contacts asking why I'd disappeared and Emma texting about her classes, unaware her parents' marriage was unraveling thread by thread. I couldn't tell her yet. Not until I understood the full scope of what I was looking at. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, Portland's signature weather matching my mood. I was deep in spreadsheets when my phone rang with a number I recognized but rarely saw. Dennis Palmer, the longest-serving board member and one of the few people who'd known me before I became Jasper's wife. Aurora. His voice was careful, measured. I heard about Thursday's meeting. News travels fast. Indeed it does. Listen, I'm calling from my personal phone for a reason. There are changes coming at the company and you should protect your interests. I set down the Campbell Industries file I'd been reviewing. What kind of changes? I can't say much, but not everyone on the board agrees with recent personnel decisions. Some of us remember who actually brought in the Morrison Hotels account. Who saved Campbell Industries from walking away. Dennis, are you trying to tell me something? He paused long enough that I thought the call had dropped. I'm telling you that workplace relationships that cross professional boundaries concern the board. Especially when they affect company performance and shareholder value. Document everything, Aurora. Everything. I already am. Good. And Aurora? You might want to review the company's ethics policy, particularly the section about disclosure of intimate relationships between executives and direct reports. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then at the security badge records showing those late-night office visits. Dennis had just confirmed what the evidence suggested, but my mind had been refusing to process. This wasn't just about professional betrayal or even marital deception. Jasper and Hazel's relationship had crossed lines that could destroy them both. I picked up the Campbell Industries contract, noting Hazel's handwritten margins again. Her notes weren't strategic insights. They were personal reminders. Jay says emphasize innovation. Check with Jay before finalizing. Jay likes this approach. Jay. Not Jasper. Not Mr. Wallace. Just Jay, with a familiarity that predated her promotion by months. The truth wasn't unraveling anymore. It had already unraveled completely, leaving me holding threads of a life I thought I'd understood. But understanding and accepting were different things entirely. And what I'd do with this knowledge? That was another question altogether. The question of what to do with this knowledge kept me awake Sunday night, staring at the ceiling while rain drummed against the windows. By Monday morning I had my answer. If they wanted to play corporate games, I'd show them what happened when they underestimated their opponent. The coffee shop on Burnside was deliberately chosen, far enough from the office district that we wouldn't run into anyone, busy enough that our conversation would disappear into the general noise. Rebecca Chin arrived first, looking polished despite having been unemployed for 4 months since her sudden departure as CFO. She'd lost weight, her suit hanging looser than it should, but her handshake remained firm. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, settling into the corner booth I'd claimed earlier. "When you called, I wondered how long it would take before someone else saw what was happening there." Rebecca wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Let me guess. Jasper finally showed his true colors? What do you mean? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The monthly finance meetings that somehow always ran late when his wife was traveling. The suggestions that we discuss budget projections over drinks. The way he'd stand too close when reviewing reports, his hand on my lower back. She met my eyes directly. I documented everything, Aurora. Every inappropriate comment, every meeting that crossed lines. HR did nothing because Bethany reports to him. My stomach turned, but I kept my expression neutral. Why didn't you come to me? You were his wife. What was I supposed to say? Your husband keeps trying to corner me in empty conference rooms. She pulled out a flash drive from her purse. But I kept records. Financial ones too. Hazel's department shows profits on paper, but the actual numbers tell a different story. The flash drive contained spreadsheets that made my evidence look amateur. Hazel had been billing hours to client accounts for work never performed, shifting expenses between departments to hide losses, claiming wins on campaigns that had actually failed. $3 million in fabricated success over 18 months. My second meeting was with Jennifer Park, former head of strategic planning, who'd resigned suddenly 6 months ago. She chose a table near the window, constantly checking the street as if expecting someone to appear. Hazel Morrison is a fraud, she said without preamble. Every successful campaign she's claimed came from someone else. She can't even write a basic creative brief without help. When I pointed this out to Jasper, he suggested I was being territorial. When I provided proof, he said I was creating a hostile work environment. She slid a folder across the table. Email threads showing her incompetence, client complaints about her handling of accounts, and my termination agreement with its very generous silence clause that I'm currently violating. The third meeting almost didn't happen. Sandra Williams, former VP of Operations, initially refused to meet, but when I mentioned Rebecca and Jennifer's names, she agreed. We sat in her car in the parking structure, engine running. I lasted longer than the others because I'm older, less threatening, Sandra said, her voice steady despite her white knuckles on the steering wheel. But when I discovered Hazel was using company credit cards for personal expenses and reported it, Jasper accused me of targeting her due to jealousy. Me, jealous of a woman half my age who can't calculate basic ROI. She handed me a manila envelope. Copies of the credit card statements. Designer clothes, jewelry, weekend trips. All buried in legitimate expense reports. All approved by your husband. By the time I got home, I had enough ammunition to destroy them both. But ammunition without strategy was just noise. I spent the rest of Monday crafting the perfect email to the board. 17 drafts until each word accomplished exactly what I needed. Not accusations but concerns. Not attacks but questions. Professional worry about patterns that might affect shareholder value. The email highlighted correlations without stating causation. Hazel's promotion timeline matched suspicious spending increases. Client retention had dropped 20% since she'd taken on larger responsibilities, but the losses were hidden by redistributing accounts. Employee turnover in the marketing department had tripled, with exit interviews citing leadership concerns that were never addressed. I attached Rebecca's financial analysis, scrubbed of anything that could identify her as the source. The numbers would speak for themselves to anyone who understood basic accounting. Which thankfully the board did even if Jasper assumed they didn't. Tuesday brought an unexpected interruption. Emma stood at my door with her backpack and a concerned expression, having driven up from Eugene without warning. Mom, your texts have been weird. What's going on? I looked at my daughter, 21 years old, with her father's eyes but my determination, and made a decision. Come in. I'll show you. She surveyed the dining room table covered in evidence, the laptop with multiple spreadsheets open, the legal pads filled with timeline notes. Is Dad having an affair? Among other things. With Hazel. She didn't sound surprised. She's always hanging around at family events, laughing too loud at his jokes. Last Thanksgiving she called him Jazzy. I wanted to throw cranberry sauce at her. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy. Because I thought maybe I was imagining things. He picked up one of the security badge reports. But this isn't imagination, is it? Emma spent the next 3 hours setting up an encrypted email system, a VPN, and secure cloud storage for my documents. Computer science major, remember? She said, typing commands I didn't understand. If you're going to war, at least protect your communications. We worked together until past midnight, mother and daughter united in purpose. She admitted things I hadn't known. How Jasper would diminish my accomplishments at dinners, claiming my strategies were really his ideas simplified for implementation. How he told her boyfriend last Christmas that I was good at execution but needed help with vision. "You're the smartest person I know, Mom. He just couldn't stand that you were smarter than him." Wednesday afternoon found me at the grocery store, maintaining the pretense of normalcy by buying wine for book club. My phone rang as I loaded Pinot Grigio into my cart. Marcus Whitman, CEO of Meridian Global, our biggest competitor. "Mrs. Wallace? I've been following your situation with interest. We're expanding our marketing division and could use someone with your expertise." I wheeled my cart to the parking lot, rain starting to fall as I found my car. "How did you?" Portland's business community is smaller than you think. Word travels when talent becomes available. I'm offering you the director position, but that's just the start. Bring me 3 major accounts and I'll make you VP within 6 months. Standing in that parking lot, rain streaming down my windshield, I negotiated the kind of package I'd never have dared ask for at Jasper's company. Signing bonus, equity shares, and yes, the ability to approach select clients about transitioning their accounts. "I'll take it," I said, watching the rain wash everything clean. "Excellent. Can you start Monday?" "Absolutely." The fuse was lit. The email to the board would go out Thursday night. My resignation letter was already drafted. The evidence was backed up in 3 locations. All that remained was watching it burn. Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., I hit send on the email to the board members, then closed my laptop and went to bed. There was nothing more to do but wait. The fuse had been lit, and by Monday morning, the explosion would be impossible to ignore. I woke at 6 a.m. to 17 text messages. Timothy's came in rapid succession starting at 7:43. Emergency board meeting called. Jasper looks like he hasn't slept. Linda just walked out. What is happening? Linda Martinez had been Jasper's executive assistant for 3 years, the kind of unflappable professional who could handle any crisis with calm efficiency. According to Timothy's breathless updates, she'd been called into the boardroom at 8 a.m., questioned about the security badge records, and asked to explain the numerous late-night office entries. She'd stood up, removed her company badge, placed it on the table, and walked out without saying a word. Her silence said everything. By 9 a.m., more texts flooded in from contacts throughout the building. The board had been sequestered for 2 hours. Hazel had been seen crying in the bathroom. Bethany from HR was frantically making phone calls from the lobby because she'd been locked out of the executive conference room. I made coffee in my kitchen, Emma still asleep upstairs, and opened my laptop to execute phase 2. The LinkedIn article I'd been refining for days was ready. When Merit Meets Politics, a case study in corporate leadership failure. No names, no company identifiers, just a carefully crafted analysis of what happens when personal relationships override professional judgment in executive decisions. I published it at exactly noon when I knew most professionals would be checking their feeds during lunch. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 30 minutes, 47 comments had appeared. Women shared stories of being passed over for less qualified male colleagues. Men described watching incompetent friends of leadership get promoted while real talent walked out the door. The comment thread became a collective therapy session for everyone who'd ever been professionally betrayed. But at 2:17 p.m., the comment that mattered most appeared. Robert Campbell, CEO of Campbell Industries, our most valuable client, wrote simply, "Leadership transitions should never compromise project continuity or client relationships. Concerned about recent changes affecting our account management. Would appreciate direct communication from Aurora Wallace regarding our ongoing campaigns." My phone rang within minutes. Robert's direct line. "Aurora, I just learned about your departure. This is unacceptable. You're the only reason we've stayed with that company. We've invested $2 million based on strategies you developed. I understand your concerns, Robert. The transition happened quickly. There is no transition. Hazel Morrison called me this morning claiming she'd been managing our account all along. She couldn't answer basic questions about our target demographics. She didn't even know we'd shifted our focus to the Southwest market last quarter. I'm sure she'll get up to speed quickly," I said, maintaining professional neutrality while knowing Hazel couldn't get up to speed on a stationary bicycle. We need you, Aurora. If you're available for independent consulting, Campbell Industries would like to retain your services immediately. I've actually accepted a position with Meridian Global. I start Monday. There was a pause, then a laugh. Marcus Whitman finally got smart. Good for him. And good for us. We'll be reaching out to Meridian about transitioning our account. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd anticipated. By 3 p.m., Hazel had sent a company-wide email that would become legendary for its complete lack of self-awareness. She claimed credit for the Campbell Industries relationship, the Morrison Hotel's crisis resolution, and 3 other major wins that had my digital fingerprints all over them. What she didn't realize was that I'd already forwarded the original project files, complete with metadata showing creation dates and revision histories, to those very clients that morning. Morrison Hotels called Jasper directly at 3:45. Timothy, who sat near Jasper's office, texted me fragments of the conversation he could hear through the door. "No, sir, I understand your concerns. Yes, Aurora was integral. We can ensure continuity. Please don't make any hasty decisions." Sterling Communications followed at 4:15. Then Pinnacle Brands at 4:42. 3 major accounts threatening to walk, each worth millions in annual revenue. Each specifically citing concerns about losing their primary strategic contact. Me. Emma came downstairs around 4, finding me at the dining table surrounded by contracts from Meridian and resignation paperwork for Jasper's company. "The internet is loving your article," she said, showing me her phone. "It's been shared 800 times. Someone started a hashtag merit over politics. I didn't mean to start a movement." "Maybe not, but you're giving people permission to tell their own stories. That matters, Mom." At 6:27 I heard Jasper's car in the driveway. Emma looked at me questioning. "Want me to leave?" "Stay. Witness this." He came through the door like a hurricane that had exhausted itself, all spent fury and depleted energy. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his face the gray color of someone watching their world collapse in real time. He didn't acknowledge Emma, just focused on me with desperate intensity. "Aurora, we need to talk. We're talking. Privately. Emma stays. She should know who her father really is." He glanced at our daughter, then back to me. "Fine. The board is conducting a full investigation. Linda quit. 3 clients are threatening to leave. You've destroyed everything we built." "Everything you built?" "I have 8 months of documentation proving I built it while you were busy doing whatever you were doing with Hazel at 11 p.m. on Saturdays." His face went white. "That's not. I have the security records, Jasper. The expense reports. The emails where you called me too emotionally invested, while planning to hand my job to your girlfriend. She's not." "Stop." I pulled out a manila folder, Catherine Volkov's article printed and highlighted. "This publishes tomorrow. Business Pacific Quarterly. 17 employees, all quoted anonymously describing the toxic culture you created. Rebecca Chen's mysterious departure. Jennifer Park's sudden resignation. Sandra Williams's silence agreement. It's all here." He sank into a chair, scanning the pages. Each highlighted quote made him flinch. A culture where personal relationships determined professional advancement. Female executives pushed out for questioning incompetent leadership. Expense irregularities overlooked when the right person was involved. "They can't publish this. I'll sue." "With what money?" "Once the board sees the financial documents Rebecca provided, you'll be too busy defending yourself to sue anyone." "You vindictive." "Careful," Emma interrupted, her voice steel. "That's my mother you're about to insult. The woman who saved your company while you were playing executive with your side piece." He looked between us, perhaps finally understanding that he'd lost more than just a corporate game. "Aurora, please. I'll give you the promotion. 50% raise. Hazel will be gone by tomorrow." I stood, gathering my papers. "I've already accepted a position with Meridian Global. Director of Strategic Marketing. They're also interested in acquiring several of your clients who've expressed concern about their current account management." "You can't do that. Non-compete clause. The one my lawyer says is unenforceable since you violated the company's ethics policy? That non-compete clause." He had nothing left to say. The man who'd always had an answer, an excuse, a deflection, sat silent in the ruins of his own making. Emma and I left him there, walking upstairs to pack the rest of my things. Tomorrow, Catherine's article would hit newsstands. Wednesday, I'd start at Meridian. By Friday, Campbell Industries would officially transition their account. The dominoes hadn't just fallen. They'd created a pattern that spelled out exactly who was responsible for their collapse. Emma and I packed the last box in silence, the sound of tape sealing cardboard echoing through the empty bedroom. The house felt hollow already, 12 years of memories boxed and labeled, ready for transport to separate futures. As we carried boxes to the rental truck, neither of us looked back at the home where our family had pretended to thrive while slowly decomposing from the inside. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of Portland spring day that made everything feel possible. The Meridian Global building rose 30 floors of gleaming glass and steel in the Pearl District, a testament to what competent leadership could build. My new assistant, David Park, met me in the lobby with a genuine smile and a tablet full of the day's priorities. Ms. Wallace, welcome to Meridian. Your office is ready on the 22nd floor. Corner suite with a view of Mount Hood on clear days. The elevator ride felt like ascending to a different life. When the doors opened, Marcus Whitman stood waiting, coffee in hand. Aurora, perfect timing. Campbell Industries signed their contract this morning. They specifically stipulated that you personally oversee all strategic initiatives. Robert Campbell called you irreplaceable. My office was everything my old cubicle wasn't. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that belonged in an architecture magazine, and a sitting area for client meetings. On the desk sat a nameplate, Aurora Wallace, Director of Strategic Marketing. No one's wife. No one's afterthought. Just my name and my achievement. I sat in the leather chair, running my fingers across the smooth desk surface and pulled off my wedding ring. The thin band of white skin underneath looked vulnerable, unprotected. I placed the ring in the top drawer, next to a photo Emma had insisted I bring. Just the two of us at her high school graduation, both laughing at something off camera. No Jasper. No pretense. Just us. 3 more clients called this morning, David informed me, setting down a list. Morrison Hotels wants to discuss transitioning their account. Sterling Communications is ready to sign. Pinnacle Brands requested a proposal by Friday. Tuesday morning I arrived early to find my email flooded with messages. The Business Pacific quarterly article had published online at midnight, and print copies were hitting newsstands across Portland. Catherine Volkov had crafted a masterpiece of investigative journalism that never mentioned names but painted a picture so clear that everyone in our industry knew exactly who and what she was describing. The article detailed a prominent Portland marketing executive whose incompetence was hidden by taking credit for others' work, supported by a company president who valued personal relationships over performance. 17 anonymous employees described a culture of fear, favoritism, and failure disguised as success. The financial analysis, carefully sourced from internal documents, showed a pattern of deception that bordered on fraud. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues sending gratitude and support. Competitors offering positions. Clients confirming their decision to follow me to Meridian. But the message that stopped me cold came from Bethany in HR. Aurora, I'm deeply sorry for my role in what happened. I knew it was wrong but was too afraid of losing my job to speak up. You deserved better. If you have any advice for someone trying to leave a toxic situation, I would be grateful. I wrote back carefully, document everything. Find a labor attorney. Don't sign anything without legal review. You know the truth, use it to protect yourself and others. Good luck. Wednesday evening, Emma drove up from Eugene to help me move into my new apartment. It was smaller than the house, a 2-bedroom in the Alberta Arts District, but every square foot was mine. We hung my awards on the living room wall. Employee of the Quarter plaques that Jasper had relegated to the garage, certificates of achievement he'd said made the house look cluttered. This place already feels more like home, Emma said, unpacking kitchen boxes. No pretending. No walking on eggshells. Just you being you. We sat on the floor eating Chinese takeout from paper containers, surrounded by boxes and bubble wrap, when Emma set down her chopsticks with unusual deliberation. Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm changing my name. What do you mean? I'm taking your maiden name. Wallace. I've already started the paperwork. She met my eyes directly. I don't want to carry the name of a man who could betray you like that. I want the name of the woman who stood up and fought back. The woman who built something from ashes. My throat tightened. Emma, he's still your father. Biologically, yes. But you're my role model. You're the parent who taught me that integrity matters more than convenience, that truth matters more than comfort. I want to be Emma Wallace. Thursday's lunch with Catherine Volkov was supposed to be celebratory. Her article had already been picked up by 3 national publications, and she was writing a follow-up about women rebuilding after professional betrayal. We sat at a riverside restaurant watching boats navigate the Willamette when the courier appeared. Aurora Wallace? He handed me an envelope that I recognized immediately. Legal documents. Divorce papers. Catherine started to excuse herself, but I waved her to stay. You might as well witness this. It's part of the story. The papers were straightforward. Jasper wanted a quick, quiet dissolution. He'd keep the house, I'd keep my retirement accounts. The prenup I'd insisted on 12 years ago, despite his protests that it showed a lack of trust, protected my inheritance and future earnings. His company stock, which had dropped 15% since Tuesday's article, would be divided according to our original agreement. Most of his net worth had evaporated with the company's plummeting valuation. I signed every page without hesitation, using the same confident signature I'd used that morning on 3 new client contracts worth $8 million in annual revenue. Any regrets? Catherine asked gently. I looked at my bare ring finger, at the divorce papers that would end 12 years of marriage, at my new business card that represented a fresh beginning. Regret suggests I'd do something differently. Every choice led me here, to a corner office, loyal clients, and a daughter who's proud to share my name. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. That evening, I stood at my new apartment window, watching the sun set over Portland's skyline. My phone showed 17 new client inquiries, a meeting request from the mayor's office about leading a women's professional development initiative, and a text from Emma. Proud of you, Mom. The Wallace women don't just survive. We thrive. The city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell, and I realized I wasn't watching the end of something. I was watching the beginning. The phoenix had risen and she was just getting started. The night stretched ahead of me, Portland's lights creating constellations against the darkness. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and headed home to my apartment where no one would judge my success or diminish my achievements. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new victories. But tonight I would simply be Aurora Wallace, a woman who had rebuilt herself from betrayal into something stronger. 6 months passed in a blur of successes that felt earned rather than stolen. The Pacific Northwest Marketing Summit invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, requesting me as their keynote speaker for the annual conference. 3,000 industry professionals would gather to hear about innovation, leadership, and building ethical corporate cultures. They wanted me to address the topic of transparent meritocracies in modern business. Standing backstage at the convention center, I adjusted my microphone and watched the previous speaker wrap up. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see the audience filling the auditorium. And there, 7 rows back on the left side, sat Jasper. His hair had gone gray at the temples, his suit hung loose on a frame that had lost weight, and his posture carried the defeat of someone who'd lost everything they'd built on lies. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed, please welcome Aurora Wallace, Chief Marketing Officer of Meridian Global. The applause carried me onto the stage, where 3,000 faces turned toward me with expectation. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see individual expressions, but I knew Jasper was watching. I could feel his presence like a stone in my shoe, noticeable but no longer painful. 2 years ago, I began, my voice steady and clear, I believed that hard work guaranteed recognition, that excellence would always triumph over politics, that the people closest to us would champion our success rather than steal it. I paused, letting the words settle. I was wrong. And that painful lesson taught me something invaluable. Meritocracy isn't something that happens naturally. It's something we build, protect, and defend every single day. For 45 minutes, I laid out the blueprint for creating corporate cultures where talent thrived and politics died. I shared case studies from Meridian's success, the 3 companies that had followed me and flourished, the employees who'd finally received recognition for their contributions. I never mentioned Jasper or his company by name, but everyone in that room knew the story behind the success. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. As I left the stage, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I recognized Jasper's new phone immediately. Aurora, please. 5 minutes. I need to explain. I deleted it without responding. 3 days later, Marcus Whitman called me into his office. Aurora, I have an unusual situation. We've been approached about acquiring Cascade Marketing. He paused, watching my face. Jasper's company. The irony was perfect. The company that had denied me a raise, that had given my position to someone unqualified, was now bleeding money and desperate for a buyer. Marcus slid a folder across his desk. The board wants you to lead the acquisition team. You know their assets better than anyone. The conference room hadn't changed. Same mahogany table, same leather chairs, same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Portland. But this time I sat at the head of the table, Meridian's legal team flanking me, while Jasper and what remained of his board sat like defendants awaiting sentencing. The terms are non-negotiable, I began, opening the acquisition folder. Meridian will absorb your remaining profitable accounts. We'll honor existing client contracts but under new management. As for personnel, I pulled out 2 termination agreements. These positions are redundant. Hazel Morrison's name topped the first document. According to my sources, she'd been freelancing for small businesses, barely making rent on a studio apartment in Gresham. Her LinkedIn profile showed a string of short-term contracts, none lasting more than 3 months. Jasper's name was on the second. His CEO position would be eliminated immediately, with a modest severance that would barely cover 6 months of expenses. The prenup had protected my assets, but the company's collapse had destroyed his. The house was in foreclosure. His car had been repossessed. The man who'd once laughed at my raise request was now facing financial ruin. I signed both termination papers with the same pen I'd used to pack my desk that Thursday afternoon when everyone thought I was just another discarded employee. The ink flowed smooth and final. Aurora, Jasper's voice cracked. Can we discuss? The terms are final. Legal will handle the transition. I stood, gathering my documents. This meeting is concluded. That evening, my mother Helen arrived from Seattle for my official installation ceremony as CMO. We had dinner at Le Pigeon, Portland's finest restaurant, where she raised her champagne glass with a knowing smile. I never liked him, she said simply. Even at your wedding something felt off. The way he always had to be the center of attention, always had to diminish your accomplishments to elevate his own. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? Sometimes we need to learn our own lessons, darling. But I knew you'd figure it out. You've always been stronger than you realized. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I suspected the affair, you know. The way that Hazel woman looked at him during your birthday dinner last year. Like a predator marking territory. And you said nothing? I trusted you to handle it your way. And look what you've built from those ashes. You didn't just survive, Aurora. You conquered. The next morning I arrived at my office at 5:30 a.m., my old routine transformed but intact. The sunrise painted Mount Hood in shades of gold and pink, a view Jasper's office had never offered. On my desk lay expansion plans for the 3 companies that had followed me from Cascade Marketing to Meridian. Campbell Industries had tripled their marketing budget. Morrison Hotels had launched a nationwide campaign that was already winning awards. Sterling Communications had gone public with a valuation that made early investors wealthy. I'd built an empire from the ruins of betrayal. Not through destruction or petty vengeance, but through excellence that couldn't be denied or stolen. Every success was earned, documented, and credited properly. Every achievement belonged to those who'd actually achieved it. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Jasper had updated his profile, seeking new opportunities in consulting. The same platform where he'd once announced my replacement now broadcast his professional collapse. I closed the notification and opened my presentation for the morning's board meeting. 3 new clients were ready to sign, 2 more companies wanted to discuss partnerships, and Emma would be joining the team as a junior strategist after graduation. The Wallace women were building something that would last longer than any marriage, any betrayal, any attempt to diminish our light. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about the titles others gave you or the raises they denied. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise. The board meeting presentation went flawlessly, with 3 new clients signing contracts worth $12 million in combined annual revenue. As I walked back to my office, the morning sun illuminated the Meridian Global lobby's marble floors, and I caught my reflection in the polished elevator doors. The woman staring back wore confidence like a tailored suit, earned through trials that would have broken someone weaker. 1 year. That's all it had taken to transform Meridian's marketing division from a competent department into an industry powerhouse. The numbers spoke louder than any promotion speech I'd ever prepared. Revenue had tripled. Client retention sat at 97%. Employee satisfaction scores in my division topped the company charts. Marcus Whitman called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 year after that devastating promotion meeting. Aurora, the board met yesterday. Unanimous decision. They want you as our newest director. Youngest woman ever appointed to this position in Meridian's 40-year history. I stood in his corner office looking out at the city below. From here I could see the building where I'd once begged for basic recognition, now dwarfed by Meridian's tower. I accept, I said simply, no elaborate speech needed. My work had already said everything. The following Monday, Emma walked into my office wearing her cap and gown, holding her diploma from the University of Oregon. Summa cum laude in marketing and communications, with a thesis on ethical leadership in modern corporations that her professors called groundbreaking. She'd driven straight from her graduation ceremony to accept her position as junior analyst on my team. Ready to get to work, Ms. Wallace? I asked, using her chosen name with pride. Ready to learn from the best, Ms. Wallace, she replied, setting her diploma on my desk. Where do we start? Morrison Hotels. They're launching a European expansion and I want fresh eyes on the campaign. Your perspective matters here, Emma. Not because you're my daughter, but because you've earned this position through your own merit. We worked side by side that afternoon, her natural talent evident in every suggestion she made. She'd inherited my attention to detail but brought her own creative vision that surprised and delighted our clients. When she presented her initial concepts to the Morrison Hotels team via video conference, they immediately approved her direction. No one mentioned she was my daughter. They saw only a brilliant young strategist who understood their brand. 3 weeks later, at the Western Marketing Alliance conference in Seattle, I was reviewing my keynote notes in the speaker's lounge when I heard a familiar voice at the registration desk. Jasper stood there, fumbling with his credit card, trying to pay the late registration fee. His suit was off the rack, his shoes scuffed, his entire demeanor that of someone trying to maintain appearances on a shoestring budget. "I'm sorry, sir, but your card was declined," the registration attendant said quietly. "Try it again. There must be a mistake." I watched him pull out another card, then another. Each rejection made his shoulders drop further. His consulting firm, according to industry gossip, consisted of him and 2 junior contractors working out of a shared workspace in the suburbs. His biggest client was a chain of local mattress stores. I could have walked away, let him struggle with the embarrassment. Instead, I approached the desk. "Put Mr. Wallace's registration on Meridian's corporate account," I told the attendant. Jasper turned, his face cycling through surprise, shame, and something that might have been gratitude. "Aurora, It's Ms. Wallace," I corrected gently but firmly. "Enjoy the conference." I walked away before he could respond. Later, during my keynote on building sustainable success through authentic leadership, I saw him in the back row, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When our eyes met briefly, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual pain. Just the neutral acknowledgement of shared history that no longer defined me. After my presentation, a young woman approached me, waiting until the crowd of well-wishers dispersed. She looked about 25, sharp-eyed but exhausted, carrying herself with the particular weight of someone enduring professional injustice. "Ms. Wallace? I'm Grace Thompson. I work at Bradley Marketing and I'm experiencing something similar to what you went through. My manager is taking credit for my campaigns while actively sabotaging my advancement. HR won't help because he's the CEO's golf buddy. I don't know what to do." I led her to a quiet corner of the convention center, away from the networking chaos. "Tell me everything." For 30 minutes, Grace outlined systematic theft of her work, gaslighting about her contributions, and a toxic environment that was destroying her confidence. It was my story with different names, different details, but the same fundamental injustice. Everyone says I should fight it out, prove my worth, show them they're wrong, Grace said, tears threatening to spill. But I'm exhausted. Can I tell you something I learned the hard way? I pulled out my business card and a pen. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not in defeat but as strategy. The energy you're spending trying to convince people who refuse to see your value, that same energy could build something extraordinary somewhere else. I wrote a note on the back of my card. This is Marcus Whitman's direct line at Meridian. Tell him I recommended you. We have an opening in our digital division that would be perfect for someone with your skills. But what about my current job? Won't leaving look like failure? Failure is staying where you're not valued. Success is recognizing your worth and finding, or creating, environments that celebrate it. I handed her the card. And Grace, document everything before you leave. Not for revenge but for protection. Truth has a way of surfacing when the time is right. 2 hours later, I sat in my hotel room video calling Emma, who was working late on the Morrison Hotel's presentation. Mom, I just got an email from Robert Campbell himself. He said our European campaign concept is exactly what they've been searching for. He wants to increase the budget by 30%. That's your success, Emma. Own it. I learned from the best. Not just about marketing but about standing tall even when people try to make you small. As we talked, I looked out at Seattle's skyline, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in this city, Grace Thompson was probably making plans to leave her toxic workplace. Emma was building her career on a foundation of merit and integrity. My mother was telling her book club about her daughter, the CMO and board director. The woman who'd walked out of that conference room with a box of belongings and a heart full of betrayal had transformed into something more powerful than I'd ever imagined. Not through bitterness or revenge, but through the simple act of refusing to accept less than I deserved. I opened my laptop to review the recommendation letter I'd written for Grace, ensuring it captured her potential while carefully avoiding any mention of her current situation. As I signed it with my digital signature, I realized this was my true legacy. Not the titles or the revenue or even the vindication. It was the chain of women I could help climb out of toxic situations, teaching them that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. Sometimes it's building something so magnificent that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. If this story of corporate revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Aurora handed Jasper the printed article from Catherine Volkov, watching his face pale as he realized his empire was crumbling. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.